Welcome to the Lean to the Left podcast, where we focus on the key social issues of our time and where we fearlessly call out Donald Trump for his attack on our freedom. Women's rights are on the agenda here today, and our guest is Jacqueline Friedland, author of a new book, Counting Backwards. It's a legal thriller that tackles such issues as reproductive rights, incarceration, and society's expectations of women and mothers. Based on true stories from the 1920s and 2020, Counting Backwards reminds us that progress is rarely a straight line and always hard-won. Jacqueline also is the author of 4 other titles, including award winners He Gets That From Me and Trouble the Water. She has a law degree from NYU and a master's in fine arts from Sarah Lawrence College. Welcome, Jacqueline, to the Lean to the Left podcast. Appreciate you being with us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
So tell us about Counting Backwards, Jacqueline, its overall themes and why you wrote it. What's the story behind the story?
Counting Backwards is based on a true story from 2020 where incarcerated immigrants were claiming they were being sterilized without their prior consent. And the book tells a fictionalized story of one lawyer who tries to help these women and how her efforts and the fight for women's rights changes all of their lives. The way that this story came to be is that when I was in high school, which was 30 years ago, I was given the task of finding a Supreme Court case for history to write a paper on. And it could be any case I wanted. And I found this case called Buck versus Bell from 1927,
Okay.
where the Supreme Court decided that they would allow the sterilization of a 17-year-old girl who was what they called at the time feeble-minded for the purpose of making sure that she would not produce offspring who were also quote unquote feeble-minded. That case is still good law. And it has stuck with me all of these years. So when I read in 2020 that there were women in a detention facility who were saying that they were being sterilized, my mind immediately went back to Carrie Buck. And I knew that this was a story I wanted to explore and a story that I wanted to tell relating the two situations to each other.
Wow. So it goes all the way back to when you were in high school. You said it's still good law. What does that mean?
The case has not been overturned. There was a statute in Virginia that called the model sterilization law. That statute no longer exists.
Okay.
However, the case law saying that Carrie Buck was afforded sufficient due process when this decision was made it's still acceptable law.
Okay.
That has not been overturned.
I see it. All right. Since Trump's now back in the White House, how are the messages in your book especially relevant today?
I would say that the messages in my book actually go back a little farther to when Roe versus Wade was overturned.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the case that overturned Roe v. Wade was called the Dobbs case.
Yeah.
And Carrie Buck in the book was a foster child and in real life lived with a family called the Dobbs family.
Oh, wow.
Just a weird coincidence.
Yeah.
But I do think that we are living in a time in history where the debate about how much control the government should have over a woman's body is still front and center. And my position in the book is that women should be able to choose for themselves what they would like to do with their own bodies.
How remarkable. Let me ask you, how are women's rights today to bodily autonomy at risk? Are they at risk more than before or what?
I would say one thing that's been interesting to me in working on this book is coming to realize that when everybody's so focused on the right to abortion and choice, and there's such a bigger question of how much right a person has over what you just said, bodily autonomy. And it's
Yeah.
a different question because
Mhm.
the rights at stake in the book that I wrote is actually the right to reproduce, which is not something that people speak about frequently because you would think who would ever infringe on that right.
Correct.
And it is at stake. And as far as what's the state of our country or our world, I think that rights are always at stake. And I think that if you don't constantly safeguard your rights, they will always be vulnerable.
Have those risks gotten worse since November?
I do not feel qualified to answer that question. I feel that there have been certainly some news that would lead us to believe that, but I'm an optimist and I am a belief that they're in reasonable centrist ideologies. And so I'm not prepared to say where we're going because I'm prepared to continue going towards rights for all.
Okay. What are society's expectations of women and mothers that you write about in your book?
So I think there's a lot of expectations on women. Number one, the assumption that all women want to have children, right? And so when you remove a woman's uterus without her consent, your first thought is now you've taken away her right to have children. Now, for me, that is something that I've always wanted, and I do have children, and it was never a question. But I think that there's in society an emphasis on women as mothers. And one of you can see in the book that the main character, Jessa, she's an attorney and she's in a law firm. And when work becomes too very crazy at the same time that she's trying to get pregnant, her husband's first suggestion is maybe you should dial it back at work. And her thought is no one's saying to you to dial it back at work. And
Uh,
or the idea that when a woman who has many kids is out in the world, that people will say to her, who's watching your kids? Nobody says that to a man, but I guess unless he's a single dad. But I think that there's a lot of expectations on women, but I think the women, a lot of them are also eager to explore different roles. And I think that there should be the freedom to be whoever they want to be.
yeah. Now, you practiced law for a little while, according to your bio. And so I'm wondering if maybe a little bit of you is seen in Jessa.
For sure, yes. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to pursue maybe being an English professor or something. And I just didn't really know how to do that. And the path to law school was much more straightforward. And I wasn't that motivated to do anything that complicated while I was having so much fun in college. So I did my law school applications and I actually really liked law school. But from the minute I stepped into a law firm, I knew that I had made a huge mistake. And I really wanted to do a job with my life where I felt like I was making the world a better place. And I ended up in a firm where I was being staffed on cases that were primarily focused on companies fighting against each other. And I just didn't want to do it. And I did find an opportunity to do some pro bono work, and that spoke to me much more. And my main character, Jessa, in the book, she loves being a lawyer and she wants to be partner. So that's different. But
Mhm.
what happens is when she gets passed over for partner, she gets really mad and said, forget it. I'm not going to be so focused on my billable hours. Give me more pro bono work. And that's how she ends up getting this case where she walks into an immigration detention facility to take what is supposed to be a very straightforward deportation, stay of deportation case, and discovers that there may be a pattern of medical malpractice happening to these women in the facility. So where I relate to Jessa is what it's like to go into a law firm day after day, and also what it's like to take on pro bono work. Where I didn't relate to her so much was in the drive to make it to the tippy top of law firm life.
Yeah, I saw that Jessa takes a pro bono job at an ICE detention center,
Yes.
which you just mentioned. To me, that just seems especially timely today, right?
Yes. It's when I started writing the book, I figured it's so long from when you start a book to when it actually gets published.
Yeah.
Even the lead time from when you finish the book, it's over a year typically. And I just assumed that by the time the book came out, immigration and reproductive rights, like that it wouldn't be so front and center on every news program everywhere,
Yeah.
but still relevant, but not that way. And it's, if anything, so much more topical now. It's too topical.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. We don't need to get into a whole big discussion about the immigration policies of the Trump-Musk administration, but I am interested in knowing how issues involving incarceration find their way into your book.
So one thing that I did not know until I began the research for this book is that many prisons and immigration detention centers in the US are not actually run by the government. They are contracted out and run by private companies. So it's the government's like the ultimate overseer,
Yeah.
but it's the day-to-day operations are taken care of by these private companies. I think that the way it works itself into the book is that you can see that obviously there are some of the people who are incarcerated are terrible, hardened criminals who've done awful things, but there are
Mhm.
also people who have made mistakes that are of a much to a much lesser degree who end up in this system that they can't figure out how to get out of. So there you see a lot of that in the book.
What are you talking about? What kind of mistakes are you talking about?
So literally, if you on immigration paperwork, if you have you have to renew your visa or your green card or whatever you're working on, if you make mistakes when you do that, the law becomes very confusing at that point, and especially for people who don't speak English and may not know how to get professional help or can't afford it. You can make one mistake after another that actually and you results in you violating the law. And
Mhm.
I suppose there's arguments on both sides that like if you're going to come to a country, you should figure out how to follow the laws of that country. But there's also the opposing argument that once you've made those mistakes, there should be a way, if they were made in good faith, that to rectify it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I see in your book that in some of the discussion about your book, you say that progress is rarely a straight line and always hard won. What do you mean by that?
So one of the distressing things about doing historical research, I think, is that you see the way history repeats itself over and over again.
Yeah.
I think, and what it's like, you have these two steps forward, one step back kind of scenarios.
Right.
And I do believe that as a society, we are continuing to make progress. However, we backslide time and time again. And the fact that I was able to tell a story that takes based on true events that take place almost 100 years apart and are so similar is it just shows how you have to keep fighting for the progress. And we've made progress in some ways. Yay, now women can get credit cards without their husband's approval. So that's progress. And like, who knows, maybe we're going to go backwards on that too. I doubt it, but we'll see. But we're definitely, but then you get Roe v. Wade overturned. And so
Yeah.
it's
Right.
two steps forward, one step back.
Yeah. I got it. All right. Now, I see from your website that you speak at book club meetings. Tell us about that.
I love talking at book clubs. I really, one of my favorite things about being a writer is connecting with readers. And
Yeah.
it's really great when you have written a story and you could have gone in any direction of how it was going to end or what was going to happen. And then you have a group full of readers who have read the book and can discuss it at length with you and ask, why didn't he just tell her that he loves her or whatever? So I'm always happy when readers reach out to me through my website or social media and ask me. I do Zoom appearances at book clubs and I also go if it's relatively close to where I live. I'm always happy to go in person too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, if these are in person or by Zoom or whatever.
I
But you
basically,
do
if
both.
they're local-ish to New York City and tri-state area, I
Uh-huh.
tend to go in person, and otherwise it's on Zoom.
That's cool, though. That really is. I know some people here locally in South Carolina that would probably love to have you on their book club meeting
I would love to meet
agenda.
with them. Let them know.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what, I'll let some of the folks here that I know about you and what you're doing, and maybe you'll hear from them. Counting Backwards has attracted great reviews. It hasn't even been published yet. So, where can people find it? And how do you account for the fact that so many other authors have complimented you and talked in print about what a great book this is?
So, as of today, the book is available wherever books are sold. So,
Okay.
people can go to their favorite bookseller and get it that way.
Uh,
And regarding the early reviews, there's so much struggle for books to get noticed these
yeah.
days. There's so many, and especially with improvements in technology, and you can just publish directly online if you want to. It's really hard to get people to know about your books. So, one
Right.
of the ways that people spread the word is by giving early copies to authors they know or authors they admire. And with any luck, those authors will read the book and remark on them. So I have been lucky that several authors have done that, as well as some.
Jacqueline, it's not luck. They wouldn't do it if the book wasn't good.
Thank you.
No, they wouldn't. I mean, if you sent it to me and I looked at it and I thought it sucked, I certainly wouldn't. But if you did and I thought it was great, I might send you one. If I was a famous author, I'm not a famous author. But anyway, so folks, if you're interested in Jacqueline's book, I will have a link in the show notes for this episode, and you can just click on it and you'll be able to pick it up if you want to. Well, that'll make it easy. You want to tell us anything more about your book or what you're up to?
I have to say, you mentioned early reviews, and the things that I keep hearing people say over and over again in these reviews is how the book is stunning in its relevancy at this moment in time, and how it's a call to action, and that while it's sad, it's also uplifting. And I hope that my goal has been to spread the word and to let people know about the importance of women's bodily autonomy and how it is still at risk. And I hope that people will pick it up and that it'll resonate with them too.
All right. Listen, I thank you very much for being with us on our podcast and talking about this. It's a very important issue. I cannot believe, by the way, that case has never been overturned. That horrible case that you talk about.
Neither can I. It gets very complicated because it's on a technical due process level. I guess they felt that at the time, they felt that she had been afforded all that was required in terms of representation and things like that.
Yeah.
But there are people still today who are being sterilized legally because some very disabled young women who have various reasons that they can't handle their monthly cycle or things like that, and their parents are afraid of sexual assault, and it gets really murky, but it's an interesting issue for anyone who wants to do some research into it.
That's happening in this country?
Yes. They're to women who are unable to take care of themselves.
Yeah, that's sad. It really is. All right. Listen, I thank you so much for being with us. And I hope that you guys out there will pick up her book, because she was kind enough to send me a copy of it. And I thought it was just great. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, I'm Bob Gatty, founder and host of Lean to the Left. I'm excited to share our new book, Hijack Nation, Donald Trump's Attack on America's Greatness, co-authored with political analyst and professor C.J. Waldron. In Hijack Nation, we delve into the unfolding story of America's political landscape through a series of essays from leantotheleft.net. We explore how Donald Trump's presidency has transformed American politics, challenging our values and institutions. Hijack Nation isn't just a book, it's a call to action. It invites you to reflect on what it means to be American in a divided political landscape. Together we can reclaim our nation's greatness. So get your copy of Hijack Nation today. Visit leantotheleft.net and click on the Books tab to learn more and to order.